They made him wait a year longer than he should have, but Luke Kuechly is officially a Pro Football Hall of Famer.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and yes, of course, Friday, your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for watching the show right here on YouTube and listening wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Panthers is sponsored by FanDuel. The Winter Games are on, and there's no better way to follow them than with a bet on FanDuel. FanDuel, play your game. Let's go back to last Thursday evening during NFL honors in San Francisco, California, ahead of Super Bowl 60. The 2026 Pro Football Hall of Fame class was officially announced, and Luke Kuechly, the greatest Panthers linebacker of all time and arguably the greatest defender in franchise history, was elected to the Pro Football Hall of Fame class of 2026 in his second year on the ballot and second year as a finalist. And man, so happy for Luke. And it's so obvious that he was a Hall of Famer and that this was going to happen this year. I think it should have happened last year, but the way that the voting process has changed recently, and we'll talk more about this as we talk about Steve Smith Sr. and when he may get into the Hall of Fame, because I think he's a Hall of Famer. It's just, when is he going to be a Hall of Famer and how long will he wait? But Luke, his wait did not need to be longer than how long it already was. 1 year was ridiculous enough. 2 years, okay, let's get him in there. And they did that. And when you look at Luke Kuechly, you're looking at a player that from day one was outstanding. A guy who dissected what an offense could do better than any linebacker of his era. A guy who didn't just have those instincts. He worked so hard in the film room, studying what offenses did, knowing what the plays they were shouting out. And it's so just apropos the fact that he and Drew Brees are both going into the Hall of Fame at the same time, considering the kind of battles that the Panthers and Saints had at the line of scrimmage, especially between those two guys, as, hey, I know what they're doing. Drew's like, okay, we need to check to something else. It's really cool that both those guys are going to be in Canton later on this summer, have their Hall of Fame bus, and be able to just discuss their careers. And I'm sure they're going to bring up the other in their speeches, but so happy for Luke to get this honor that he so richly deserves. And he's been such a great ambassador to not just the game of football, but for this organization. Once he retired, he stuck around for a little bit as a scout. He tried to figure out what he wanted to do with his life, left for a little bit, then came back. I see him in the press conference, the press box every single Sunday in Carolina. He's been a part of the radio broadcast, doing other things in-house. So happy for him to have this happen. And when you look at it, he is the first Carolina Panthers player who spent his entire career in Carolina to be inducted into the Hall of Fame. And that's not to take away from Julius Peppers, the Bailey, North Carolina native who played at Carolina as well. Started off his career in Carolina, then went to Chicago, then Green Bay, then finished off his career here with the Panthers. He is a Carolina Panther. He is not a Chicago Bear. He is not a Green Bay Packer. He is a Carolina Panther. He is a Tar Heel. He is one of the great North Carolinians we have ever had in the state, athletically, of course. So Pep, he counts. Sam Mills spent the entirety of his career outside the final 3 years in New Orleans, a division rival for Carolina, but he has his statue outside of Bank of America Stadium. There's not a statue. I've never been to Mercedes-Benz Stadiums, or is it the Caesar Superdome, whatever the hell they call it now, the Superdome. I've never been to the Superdome. I'm pretty sure there's not a statue of Sam Mills out there. Now, Sam Mills, of course, left an indelible moment back in 2004, that January playoff game against the Cowboys, where he told the guys to keep pounding. That still is a franchise's mantra. That is the DNA of who the Carolina Panthers are in 2026 and will always and forever be. He's a Panther. But neither one of those guys spent their entire career in Carolina. So Luke becomes the first to do that. And I'm excited for him. I'm happy for him. And I'm happy for all of y'all who have, of course, loved Luke Kuechly throughout the years. Again, he's joining a class with Drew Brees from the New Orleans Saints, began his career in San Diego with the Chargers. Larry Fitzgerald, one of the all-time greats. Remember when he was back at Pitt, and I felt like he should have won the Heisman Trophy that year. He goes on to be one of the all-time greatest wide receivers in the NFL. Adam Vinatieri, who broke everybody's hearts back in that Super Bowl back in 2004, Super Bowl 38 down in Houston. I was there with my dad. He's in the Hall of Fame after his Hall of Fame career with the Pats and the Colts, right? And then a senior candidate, and long overdue, in my opinion, Roger Craig was part of some great San Francisco 49ers teams, the running back for those teams. He gets in. We talked about this back in 2019. Well, I guess I wasn't doing the show back in 2019, but it was a discussion point in 2019. McCaffrey had his 1,000 season. The only other two players to have done that in the history of the National Football League then and now were Marshall Faulk and Roger Craig. Faulk, of course, in the Hall of Fame. Now Roger Craig finally gets into the Hall of Fame at this stage of his life. So good for him. So those are the guys who are going with Luke. And you look just at Luke's overall resume. 7-time Pro Bowler when it mattered. Doesn't matter anymore when a guy like Shedeur Sanders is going into the Pro Bowl. That's not hate. That's just a fact of what we saw this past season. They're letting anybody and everybody in. Just move it back to Hawaii. It doesn't have to be a game. It could just be the flag football and those guys relaxing, but let it actually be the best players from the season. So back when it mattered, Luke went to 7 Pro Bowls. 5-time first-team All-Pro, 2-time second-team All-Pro, all-decade team for the 2010s, 2013 AP Defensive Player of the Year, 2012 AP PFWA, and Sporting News Defensive Rookie of the Year. 8 seasons he played, and he goes to the Hall of Fame, and that's really kind of similar to what we've seen recently from guys like Tony Baselli with the Jags, who did not have a long career, Calvin Johnson with the Lions, who did not have a long career. And the one guy I really looked at when comparing Luke and wondering what his Hall of Fame candidacy would be, like he was going in eventually. I just wondered how long would he wait? Patrick Willis had a very similar resume to Luke, 7-time Pro Bowler, 5-time first-team All-Pro, was also part of the 2010s All-Decade Team, AP Defensive Rookie of the Year. The only thing he never was the Defensive Player of the Year in the NFL, and he received the call from the Hall in his 5th year of eligibility in his 2nd year as a finalist. So Luke gets in quicker by 3 years than Patrick Willis did. Now, 2nd time he's a finalist. Same case with Willis. 2nd time he was a finalist. He got in, but he gets in sooner than Patrick Willis. 2 guys who had pretty similar resumes, were both outstanding players back in their college careers at Ole Miss and Boston College, respectively, but certainly in the NFL that has them now both in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. You look at just Luke, franchise numbers here in Carolina, 1,092 combined tackles in his 8 seasons. 609 of them were solo, making him the 2nd best tackler in franchise history behind Thomas Davis. TD had 1,098 combined tackles, so 6 more than Luke did during his Panthers career. And Pro Football Reference does something interesting called approximate value. I suppose this is their way of trying to rank players and try to figure out what their value was as they were there with that organization. And Kuechly is the 3rd highest rated player according to them. Cam Newton, number 1, Steve Smith Sr., number 2, Kuechly 3. Then right behind him, a point behind him actually, is Julius Peppers. Pep's a Hall of Famer. Luke's a Hall of Famer. I think Smitty's going to be a Hall of Famer. And then Cam Newton, that is a whole nother separate conversation that I do not want to have on this show today. And I don't know when we're going to have that conversation, just considering how the voting has changed. And because the voting has changed, that is going to make things difficult for Steve Smith Sr., who I believe is a Hall of Famer. But when will that day occur? Because there's some guys out there like Torrey Holt and Reggie Wayne, who are also great receivers, playing on great teams, who are waiting. And they've been waiting for a long time. How long will Steve Smith Sr. have to wait? We'll talk about that here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. Want to know why betting the winter games on FanDuel makes sense? From game lines to medal counts to finding your angle on the events you care about most, FanDuel gives you more ways to stay connected to the action. The winter games are on, and there's no better way to follow them than with a bet on FanDuel. Curling matches that start slow and somehow get tense fast, speed skating decided by inches, hockey games that feel different from the opening faceoff, and so much more. FanDuel, play your game. It's been a few years of Carolina Panthers going into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Sam Mills went in a couple years ago, then followed by Julius Peppers. Now Luke Kuechly becomes the first Panther to spend his entire career in Carolina to now be inducted, at least elected into the Pro Football Hall of Fame going in later on this summer in Canton, Ohio. So richly deserved for all three of those former Panther greats. Now we wait to see when Steve Smith Sr. will go in, as I'm just looking at the former Panthers, like Greg Olsen. Maybe there's an argument. I do think, like, Tony Baselli was a great player with the Jags. I think having a media career helped him as far as just staying ever present and being able to get a chance to get into the Hall of Fame, which happened a couple of years ago. You look at Steve Smith, he's in the media right now. Greg Olsen is on Fox as their number 2 broadcaster, which, hey, Brady's gotten better. Man, I hate that for Greg, but Greg is a great broadcaster, was a really good player in the NFL. Was he a great player? That's the question. Was he one of the all-time greats at his position and deserving of going to the Hall of Fame? Rob Gronkowski is eligible next year. He was not better than Gronk. He certainly, whenever Travis Kelce comes out, was not better than Travis Kelce, but he was a damn good player. So we'll wait and see how that plays out. And then Cam Newton, man, if there was just a overall, like, I like what basketball does. There's a Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame. It's not the Pro Basketball Hall of Fame. There is a College Basketball Hall of Fame in Kansas City, but it's the Basketball Hall of Fame. They have given awards to distinguished people who were just in the media as writers, but also the high school coaches, high school players, college players, and pro players. If there was just a overall Football Hall of Fame, Cam Newton's going in it. But because it's a Pro Football Hall of Fame, and Cam was such a player that led a lot of different, so polarizing. That's the word I'm trying to find. And you look at him now, his media career, and I really don't ever want to discuss Cam unless we talk about what he did on the field here during the glory days in Carolina. I don't know how that's going to work out. You look at what he did. He was dominant as hell back in 2015, dragging that team to the Super Bowl. And there was a ton of guys who had great years that season. I understand that. But what he was able to do for this organization, for this city, I hope one day he gets in the Hall of Fame. I'm not super confident that's going to happen, but he would be the other one we're looking at. But really, the Panther that, to me, is certainly, without argument, a Hall of Fame player, one of the best at his position, an all-time great playing this game at the NFL level, is Steve Smith Sr., but he's been waiting, and he's probably going to have to keep waiting a long time to get in. Larry Fitzgerald was elected on Thursday night, meaning that the top 7 players in all-time receiving yardage are all now going to be in the Hall of Fame. Jerry Rice, the greatest receiver of all time. Larry Fitzgerald, Terrell Owens, Randy Moss, Isaac Bruce, Tony Gonzalez. Speaking of tight ends, he's up there. Then Tim Brown, he is also in the Hall of Fame. Those are the top 7 all-time in receiving yardage in the history of the National Football League. And right behind them, sitting at 8, is Steve Smith Sr. And behind him are guys like Marvin Harrison, who's in the Hall of Fame. Andre Johnson's in the Hall of Fame. James Aloft in the Hall of Fame. We're playing a different era. He's in the Hall of Fame. Chris Carter, he's in the Hall of Fame as well. So there are guys who had numbers, and Calvin Johnson is another who was recent, who kind of like Luke did not play very long, but was absolutely ridiculous when he did play for those short years, at least as far as you look at some of these Hall of Fame NFL careers that typically are, because you're not going to be the top in receiving yardage if you don't play for a long ass time, like Jerry Rice did, like Larry Fitzgerald did, like Steve Smith Sr. did during his career in Carolina and then later on in Baltimore. So you just look at the guys who are ahead of him and the guys who are behind him and just where the numbers are, you would think eventually Steve's going to get in. And I think that's going to happen. Looking at his resume, 5-time Pro Bowler, 2 times first team All-Pro, a Triple Crown winner, and a dude who just had longevity, his ice-up son, his general attitude. 5'9", diminutive kind of player, and he was able to get himself to the league and to be dominant during his career, both in Carolina, then also later on in Baltimore. Hell, blood and guts. Remember that? What happened, that revenge game he had against Carolina when he was with the Ravens? That dude belongs in the Hall, but it's going to be difficult for him to get in because of how things have changed recently. The Hall of Fame board of directors a couple of years ago changed bylaws, quote, to help ensure that membership in the Hall of Fame remains elite. So they felt like too many guys were getting in, and the Hall of Fame ceremonies were taking too long as they were letting guys basically talk until they were done talking. They were thanking all their coaches, their parents, their school cafeteria workers, everybody they were thanking to get into that spot, which that's what they're allowed to do. But it was a little bit over the top, they felt like. Too many people were getting in. So they wanted to be more like the Baseball Hall of Fame, I suppose, and let nobody into the Hall of Fame, as we saw a year ago, had the least amount of people in the Hall of Fame since like 2005, with, I believe, 4 people getting in. Now, when you look at it, because in the past, it used to be 15 modern finalists were discussed, and then they would reduce them to 10 and then to 5. And then once the final 5 were selected, those candidates then would be all just asked. Well, all the voters would be asked about the candidates, whether they were yes or no, as far as them getting the Hall of Fame, and they had to reach an 80% committee threshold, which typically that happened. The only person who didn't was the former commissioner, Paul Tagliabue, which good. Don't put the commissioner in the Hall of Fame. He eventually did get in, but not by the voters. For the modern finalists, he got in on a different distinction. So it used to just be, 15, down to 10, down to 5. All right, you're in. Now they've reduced it to 15 to 10, to then 7. And at that point, each member is instructed to vote for 5 of the 7. They're not all voting for each of the person saying yes or no. They're voting for 5 of the 7. And only the players who reach an 80% threshold will be inducted. So it could be in the past where they would have voted every single one of those guys in. But now they have to choose. Which 5 do you think is better than the other 2 of the 7? So that's made it difficult, and that has minimized classes to where now they can have a minimum of 3 members that are modern and 1 from the senior/coach/contributor pool, and they can have a maximum of 5 modern finalists or 5 modern guys who get inducted. So 15 finalists cut down to 10 to 7, and then only 5 of those 7 can get into the Hall of Fame, but they have to all reach an 80% threshold as far as their votes when the committee votes for 7, but picks their top 5. So they've made it difficult. And that's part of why there's been some controversy over the last week with the Hall of Fame. And that's really been on the senior/coach/contributor side. As you look at it, you had guys like Bill Belichick, who did not get into the Hall of Fame. He's a Hall of Famer. Come on, all-time greatest coach in NFL history. I hate him. I've always hated Bill Belichick. I hate what he's doing in Chapel Hill. I think it's been a disaster. I think it's not going to get any better. I don't like the guy, but I understand it's absurd that he's not in the Hall of Fame. Like, how does that even happen? You look at Robert Kraft, the owner there in New England. Now, I'm recording this before the Super Bowl on Sunday, so I have no idea whether New England won or not, but that guy may have now 7 Super Bowl rings as an owner. He deserves going to the Hall of Fame eventually as well. So it doesn't really make a lot of sense how those guys can't get in, but they've made it difficult for both the players and the coaches, the owners, and random other people and past players who missed the boat as modern candidates to get into the Hall of Fame. Now, you look a year from now, Ben Roethlisberger, Adrian Peterson, Rob Gronkowski are all going to be on the ballot for the first time. Big Ben's a Hall of Famer. Adrian Peterson's a Hall of Famer. Gronk's a Hall of Famer. Are they going to be first ballot? I don't know. But they're going in, and you can't forget about like Eli Manning. He wasn't a finalist this past year, but eventually they're going to put him in. Maybe they're going to wait to put in Brady and Belichick and Kraft, and then they'll be like, well, he took down the Giants did, but he helped the Giants take down Brady and Belichick and Kraft twice in the Super Bowl, was Super Bowl MVP, and his last name is Manning. And again, the media angle, like, do I think Eli Manning is necessarily a Hall of Famer? I guess I don't really care, honestly. Like Phillip Rivers, they talk about he helped his Hall of Fame case by coming back this past year. He helped this case of showing he's still a good quarterback and better than a lot of guys. And I think that's more of a indictment on coaching nowadays, from the high school level to the college level to the pro level, that Rivers can come in and look better than guys like Riley Leonard. So that's what I take away from that. I don't necessarily buy him being a Hall of Famer, a really good quarterback, but is he one of the all-time greats? I don't know. But for Steve Smith Sr., you might be waiting behind Big Ben and behind AD, not AP, AD all day. That's what it stood for. Adrian Peterson, when he was at Oklahoma, should have won the Heisman Trophy, by the way, and then went to the NFL. AD, not AP, all day. And then Gronk. I mean, those 3 guys, obvious candidates. Now, Peterson, maybe some stuff off the field. Roethlisberger, you would argue that as well. That might keep them out for the time being. And then you have to look at the wide receivers. Guys like Reggie Wayne and Torrey Holt have been finalists 7 times, and they still have not gone in. Steve was a finalist back in 2025 for that class. He was not a finalist this past season. So he's only been a finalist 1 time, while those guys have been 7 times. Now, he has better numbers than them. Now, some of the accolades may not be right there, apples to apples, but Smitty is going to get in eventually. He just may be waiting just as long as Reggie Wayne and Torrey Holt have had to wait so far, just based off of the criteria right now. Maybe they change it on the player side. They certainly have to change it, I think, on the coaches and contributor side, considering what happened with Belichick and what happened with Kraft this past year. But player side, I don't know if they want to change it. And then you look ahead to next year, not just with Big Ben and with Adrian Peterson and Gronk, it's that there's guys who were a part of the final 7 this past year in Terrell Suggs and Willie Anderson and Marshall Yanda, who automatically are part of the top 15 finalists next year. So that's 3 spots. And you would think that with Big Ben and AD and Gronk, those 6, there's 9 more remaining, and probably 2 of them are going to Reggie Wayne and going to Torrey Holt. So then there's 7 remaining. Will Steve Smith Sr. be a part of those 7? And then if he is, will he get into the top 7 of voting? And then will enough people vote for him in their top 5 for him to get across the finish line next season? I have a hard time seeing that happen. I think this is going to be a long wait for Steve Smith Sr. And I hate it for him. This is how the process is right now. It could change. He's a Hall of Famer in my mind, and I certainly think statistically he is. But you're not a Hall of Famer until you're a Hall of Famer. So we'll see how long that's wait going to be. But I would not be guessing that next year or even the year after it's going to happen soon for Smitty, because, man, the process is difficult. And there's guys like Wayne and Holt have been waiting a very, very long time. And there are some great players like Brady who will be up there very soon to go into the Hall of Fame. So we'll see how that plays out. Tetairoa McMillan, he started off his rookie year and maybe the first year of a Hall of Fame career as being the Rookie of the Year, according to the AP. We'll talk about his award that he got on Thursday here in just a moment on Locked on Panthers. If you've ever hired someone who looked good on paper but wasn't the right fit, you know how important that is when you want candidates who truly match what you're looking for. Trust Indeed sponsored jobs. Hiring Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed sponsored jobs puts your post at the top of the page and helps you reach the right candidates faster. Sponsored jobs boost your post to the people who are the best match for your role, and that makes a real difference. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed are 90% more likely to report a hire than non-sponsored jobs. Spend more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with less stress, less time, and more results using Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of this show get a $75 sponsored job credit to help give your job the premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL. Just go to Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL right now and support the show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, do it the right way with Indeed. Luke Kuechly was not the only Panther to be honored at NFL Honors on Thursday night in San Francisco. Tetairoa McMillan, the Panthers' rookie wide receiver sensation, was announced as the AP Offensive Rookie of the Year, earning 41 out of the 48 first-place votes, 445 points. The runner-up was Tyler Shuck from the Saints, who had 5 first-place votes and 168 points combined. And thank God, honestly, the voters got this right. I was looking at FanDuel and the odds late in the season when Shuck came out and looked really good. Was not great his first game against the Rams. Was pretty good his second game against the Panthers, and that upset win for the Saints after the Panthers had just won in Green Bay. And he was great later on that season as well. So, yeah, New Orleans has got a quarterback. But, man, he didn't play the full season because he lost the quarterback competition. And I don't know all the intricacies and details to why they picked Spencer Rattler over him coming out of camp and out of the preseason, but they went with Rattler. They didn't go with Shuck. And had Shuck been here the whole season and done what he did in the second half of the season, then yes, he would have been the Offensive Rookie of the Year. Why? Because he's a quarterback. Much like the year prior, Jaden Daniels, he won it. Malik Neighbors, I mean, come on. Daniels was really good. But you're telling me Malik Neighbors wasn't better? Okay, it's the quarterback bias of it all. And there's been some real interesting things with the voting that's gone on the last couple, or really going back to last week. Like Sam Monson, formerly of PFF, now does a show covering the NFL of Steve Palazzolo, who is also at PFF. He apparently voted for Justin Herbert to win MVP, and Drake May ends up having one less first place vote than Matthew Stafford. And the thing too was, like Monson was saying, he didn't think Stafford was the MVP because Stafford's offensive line, whenever it had any issues, he was terrible. While you look at Justin Herbert, didn't have his tackles all season long, and he was good. But come on. I don't know if his vote's the reason why Drake May didn't win the MVP. It's not really that big of a deal because, again, by the time you are watching or listening to this, Drake May could already have been a Super Bowl MVP, Super Bowl winner. So whatever, not a big deal. But yeah, like there's been some questions as far as the voting process goes. And the fan vote, which was the Pepsi Rookie of the Year, that went to Tyler Shuck. So thank God the fans don't have a vote in any of this kind of stuff. Like other all-star games like MLB and like NBA, they have a vote. They shouldn't have a vote because it's all just biased. You look at how fans are reacting to Sam Monson, like Patriot fans are just like, you're an idiot. Like that's why fans shouldn't. Because fan is short for fanatic. And a lot of people have no freaking chill when it comes to any of this stuff at all and don't realize that it really is not that big of a deal. Now it is a big deal considering just like Hall of Fame candidacy. And there's a push from guys like Dan Orlovsky, which makes sense. Like he played with Matthew in Detroit, like they're buddies, but man, Matthew Stafford's not a Hall of Fame quarterback. Yeah, he won the one Super Bowl. He won an MVP now, barely, against a second-year player in Drake May, who may end up winning a Super Bowl on Sunday. He's not a Hall of Fame player. Really good quarterback at Georgia. Not as good as we thought he was going to be. That one year, they ranked number one with him and Noshan Moreno, and they got their ass kicked by Nick Saban during that blackout game in Athens. Like, okay, it was fun. In Detroit, we didn't really pay attention because it's the Lions. He had plenty of comeback wins, and then he got to L.A., won Super Bowl with Sean McVay. Great. Not a Hall of Famer. Good quarterback. So it is important when looking just at Hall of Fame resumes, because again, I brought up Luke Kuechly being an AP Defensive Player of the Year, being a Rookie of the Year, according to the AP, the PFWA, and Sporting News, being a part of the All-Decade team, which the Hall of Fame chooses, by the way. And then, of course, Pro Bowls, which used to matter, and All-Pros. That definitely still does matter. It does matter. I understand that. But sometimes people take it way too seriously. So the one that actually mattered, that being the AP, elected or voted Tetairoa McMillan as the offensive rookie of the year in the NFL this past season. PFWA, the Pro Football Writers Association, also gave him that distinction. It's only the fans who clearly don't know what the hell they're talking about in this situation who decided that Tyler Shuck, who only played half the season, was the rookie of the year offensively when T-Mac played from game one all the way to the playoff game and was the only consistent weapon for Bryce Young all season long and the only consistent player offensively among all the rookies. Like Jackson Dart didn't start out the year. Was it Trevion Henderson wasn't really doing anything for a while there, and he's still not even top back really in New England. It was T-Mac. It was so easy. And you look at the voting, the voters didn't even think about it. So the odds makers are trying to make it seem as if Tyler Shuck, and that's what they're trying to do. There's reasons, there's big towers there in the desert in Vegas. But yeah, good for the voters for getting this one right. McMillan is the first Panther player to win the award since Cam Newton in 2011. He had 70 receptions this past year, 1,014 yards. Of course, that was a franchise record. Those also led all rookies in the NFL this past year. His yardage was 14th in the entire league, while he had 7 touchdowns, which was the most receiving touchdowns by a rookie this year. His 55 total first downs led all rookies, and he was tied 7th league-wide. So he was great. I looked at him coming out of the draft when the Panthers selected him. Again, didn't think that was going to happen. And the Panthers didn't overthink it. They went with their board, and they went with this guy 8th overall. And if they get to 19 this next coming draft in Pittsburgh, I finally figured out where it's going to be in April. And they look at somebody at 19. It's not a linebacker. It's not a defensive end. It's a position they think that they need, but also the best player on their board, and they go with it. I suppose you're going to have to trust them because they went with their board when we were all like, oh, you sure about that? And buddy, did they get this one right? And did they need T-Mac this past year as he was outstanding? I thought he was right there on the level of Malik Neighbors and Marvin Harrison Jr. and Rome Odunze. Turns out Harrison Jr. and Odunze are not on his level. Neighbors is one of the top young receivers in the NFL is T-Mac, and he is a Carolina Panther. So be excited about all the things yet to come with him and his career here in Carolina. But that's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, part of Locked On Podcast Network. Hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all, subscribe or follow the show free over on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, over on Twitter and over on Blue Sky at Julian Council, where I'll be back. I believe it's going to be next Friday, answering your weekly. Yeah, next Friday, answer your weekly Friday mailbag questions. So at me, DM me, get any questions in right now. In the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole. As always, keep pounding. And in tomorrow's show, we'll get back to our position off-season previews. We'll take a look at the interior of the Panthers defensive line. All that more coming up on Tuesday here on Locked On Panthers.